Jack's slow footsteps echoed through the quiet, narrow alleyway with hardly a soul passing by. The house he was looking at was a two-story building tucked away in a secluded alley amidst a bustling and lively city. Unlike the busy, crowded main streets, this alley was extremely quiet, almost isolated from the outside world. He looked around, feeling a sense of strangeness, as if this place had grown too accustomed to silence, completely different from the lively environment he was used to. Jack reached for his phone, intending to call, but then decided against it. Finally, after waiting for over an hour, a motorcycle sped into the alley and stopped right in front of him. The man on the bike got off, his figure thin, his face exhausted, yet his eyes were sharp. He gave Jack a once-over, looking him up and down before speaking.
"You here for the job?"
Jack nodded and smiled politely.
"Yes, I'm Jack. I came here as invited."
The man said nothing more, just raised an eyebrow slightly before unlocking the door. He led Jack inside the house, talking as they went.
"You'll work here. I'll transfer your salary to your account every month. The main job is just to clean the house and keep it tidy. I'm rarely home, so you don't have to worry about cooking for me. If there's anything missing in the kitchen, just buy more and let me know. I'll reimburse you later."
Jack nodded silently and followed the man up the stairs. He introduced himself as Peter, currently the director of a company specializing in construction materials. His work kept him busy, so he was rarely home. After giving Jack a brief tour of the house and explaining the rooms, Peter left, leaving Jack alone. Jack breathed a sigh of relief and gently placed his suitcase on the floor of his room. He glanced around the house, trying to memorize every corner. The house wasn't very big, but it was well kept, with neatly arranged furniture. However, what made Jack feel slightly uneasy was the cold atmosphere enveloping the place, as if it had been unoccupied for a long time. On his first night in the new house, Jack lay in bed, his eyes tracing the lines on the ceiling. The creaking sound of the window being lightly hit by the wind startled him. Could the wind be strong enough to move such a thick wooden door? He jumped up, intending to close the window when he suddenly heard footsteps coming from downstairs. Jack glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. Could it be Peter coming home? He cautiously walked down the stairs, but upon reaching the ground floor, the lights were still off, and the house was shrouded in dim shadows. Jack stepped into the living room, sensing that something was off. He looked around but saw no one. Just as he was about to head back upstairs, a white figure flashed by the corner of his eye, freezing him in place. The figure glided by gracefully, long hair flowing, obscuring its face. Jack's heart nearly stopped. He let out a panicked scream and dashed up to his room, slamming the door shut. That night, Jack couldn't sleep at all. He lay in bed, his mind replaying the image of the woman in white. Who was she? Why did she appear in this house? Could she be a ghost? He didn't dare think further and tried to force himself to sleep until morning. The next morning, Jack woke up feeling drained. He left his room and started cleaning as usual. While wiping down the living room, Jack overheard neighbors outside whispering. They were talking about him, about the house, and about a woman named Jenny. The name made him flinch. Was that the white figure he saw last night? He stepped outside, wanting to ask more, but as soon as he opened the door, the neighbors fell silent, pretending nothing had happened.
"Help me."
Her voice was like a breeze, soft yet chilling. Jack froze, unsure of what to do. She was a ghost, but why was she asking for his help? He wanted to ask more, but the white figure slowly faded away, leaving only a thin mist that dissolved into the air. He sat there on the bed, heart pounding wildly. Could it be? That ghost had something to say. And if the rumors were true, and the woman named Jenny had died unjustly, what did her death have to do with the owner, Peter? He needed to dig deeper. Gradually, Jack began uncovering the horrifying secrets hidden within the house. Dry bloodstains clung tightly to the walls beneath a new coat of paint. Objects were inexplicably moved. And then there was the large mirror in the living room. Every time Jack looked at himself in it, he always felt as if someone was staring back from the other side. Until one day, Jenny's ghost appeared clearly in the mirror, tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered,
Find my body. I don't want to be trapped in this house forever.
Jack finally understood everything, and from that day on, he began his quest to find Jenny's remains, to free her spirit from this place of imprisonment. Jack began his journey to find Jenny's remains with a heavy heart and a vague sense of fear. Each step he took now felt like stepping into an endless abyss, where everything was swallowed by darkness. After what he had witnessed in that house, he knew he couldn't give up. If he didn't uncover the truth behind Jenny's death, her spirit would forever be trapped, unable to find peace. But this journey was not going to be easy, as it seemed there was an invisible hand controlling everything. And the deeper Jack delved into Jenny's past, the more he felt like a puppet in this horrifying play. One evening, Jack decided to sneak into Peter's room to look for clues. This room had been strictly off limits to anyone, including Jack. He carefully searched every corner, every drawer, and the locked cabinet. Suddenly, his gaze landed on an old notebook lying quietly in the bottom drawer. The red ink on its cover was faded, but Jack could still make out the scrawled words. Jenny's diary. His hands trembled as he opened the first few pages. Jenny's words appeared, recounting a life full of suffering within this house. Jenny had once been a maid for Peter, but the horrifying truth beneath was that she had been forced to stay here under his absolute control. Jenny had tried to escape many times, but each attempt was discovered and punished. There were parts of the diary where Jenny described the brutal punishments Peter used to coerce her into obedience. Jack continued reading.
He's going to kill me. If anyone finds this notebook, please find my body. I'm buried somewhere around here, not far, right under, where water cannot wash away my blood.
Jack read that sentence over and over again.
Where water cannot wash away my blood?
He didn't understand the hidden meaning behind these words, but his instincts told him that place was very close. Perhaps Jenny was hinting at a location within the house. That night, Jack tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The wind howled through the cracks of the door, the sound resembling eerie whispers coming from somewhere in the house. Every time Jack closed his eyes, the image of the long-haired woman appeared, her face covered in blood, her eyes wide open as if urging him to take action. He decided he couldn't wait any longer. Jack grabbed a small flashlight and began inspecting every corner of the house as the clock struck midnight. He made his way down to the basement, a place he had never ventured into before. The basement was narrow, with walls covered in moss and crisscrossed with cracks like a spider's web. The smell of mold hit him hard, forcing Jack to cover his nose. The flashlight beam flickered across the walls until it stopped on a spot of fresh paint. Jack frowned and stepped closer.
This wall.
It seemed to have been painted not too long ago. Jack carefully knocked on the wall. A hollow sound echoed back. It wasn't like the other walls in the house. There was something inside this wall. With a few tools he found in the corner of the basement, Jack began gently chiseling away at the plaster. Each piece that fell away revealed a layer of broken bricks underneath. His heart pounded as he felt each strike reverberate like a funeral drum in the dead silence of the night. Finally, after nearly an hour, Jack broke through a large section of the wall. Before him was a hollow space inside. It was a large black sack, covered in cobwebs and green moss. His limbs trembled, and his head spun.
Could it be? This was where Jenny's body was hidden.
Jack pulled the sack out carefully, slicing through the decayed fabric, layer by layer. His hand shook as the cloth slowly peeled away, revealing a long jet-black strand of hair mixed with shattered bones. A foul stench filled the air, causing Jack to instinctively recoil. This was Jenny. He had just found her concealed remains. But as Jack began to back away, a white figure suddenly appeared right beside him. Jenny, her ghost, with a pale face and eyes filled with rage, was standing there, staring at him. Jack felt his entire body freeze, his legs refusing to move. But this time, Jenny did not attack him. She stared intently, her gaze softening.
Thank you.
Jenny whispered, her voice echoing as if from a distant place.
But it's not over yet. He still hasn't told everything.
Jack's eyes widened.
Peter had been arrested a long time ago. Could there be someone else involved in Jenny's death?
I need to know who hurt me.
Jenny continued, her eyes boring into Jack's, as if peering into his very soul.
There's someone in the shadows. That person is the one pulling all the strings.
Jack stumbled back in shock. He barely had time to process what she was saying before Jenny's spirit vanished, leaving him alone in the dark with her decaying body in front of him. The next morning, Jack went to the police and reported the discovery of Jenny's remains. But as soon as he left the police station, his phone received a strange message.
Don't think it's over. You're next.
Jack's heart skipped a beat, and cold sweat broke out across his forehead. Who was behind all of this? Peter had been arrested, but according to what Jenny's spirit said, it wasn't over. There was someone else, someone Jenny feared more than anyone still out there and watching Jack's every move. Jack left the police station, his mind spinning with chaotic thoughts. Who had sent that message to him? Peter was already behind bars, and he was held responsible for Jenny's death. But even in death, Jenny still feared someone. And now, that person was targeting him. As night began to fall, Jack returned to the house where Jenny's ghost had once appeared. He sat on the doorstep, staring blankly at the darkened yard in front of him. Under the dim streetlight, the house no longer seemed just cold and empty. It now felt as though it hid a sinister force, silently waiting. Jack clenched his fists. He knew he had to continue. Jenny's spirit hadn't found peace yet, and he had to uncover the truth. Jack decided to go back to the basement, the place where he had found Jenny's body. Something still seemed to be concealed. He carefully stepped down each stair, the flashlight beam sweeping across the cold walls. The space below remained unchanged, still and silent like a tomb. He moved to the spot where Jenny's body had been hidden. The empty hole before him yawned like a dark, gaping mouth, exuding a menacing aura. Suddenly, a chilling breeze swept through, even though the basement door was shut tight. Jack felt another presence. He turned around. On the opposite wall, red words began to appear, spreading across the surface as if someone were writing with fingers dipped in blood. This house didn't just claim one victim. Jenny was just the beginning. That man, he won't let anyone who seeks the truth go free. Run, or you will die like me. Jack staggered back, his heart pounding. His eyes widened in horror as he watched the words shift right before him. The red liquid soaked into the wall, forming the shape of a slender hand with sharp, claw-like fingers. It slowly scratched at the wall, producing a nerve-wracking sound. Suddenly, a hidden door in the wall creaked open, revealing a dark tunnel leading into the depths. Jack held his breath. He had never known of this basement's existence. The wall where Jenny's body was hidden was not the end. This was where it all truly began. The flashlight beam flickered down the damp corridor, water dripping rhythmically onto the cold stone floor. His footsteps echoed, mingling with the sound of his own ragged breathing. Slowly, he ventured inside. The tunnel grew narrower and deeper, like a labyrinth of darkness. The stone walls were rough, smeared with patches of dried blood. The stains had long since dried, but still marked the walls with grotesque patterns. The further Jack went, the more he realized this was not a tunnel leading to anywhere ordinary. It felt more like a dungeon, suffused with the smell of decay and a stifling sense of suffocation. Abruptly, Jack's flashlight illuminated a massive metal door deep within the tunnel. The door was tightly shut, surrounded by scratches and rust, as if it had been abandoned for decades. He stepped closer, his hand trembling as he touched the handle. As soon as he turned it slightly, the door creaked open, emitting a bone-chilling sound. Inside, a large, cavernous room stretched out before him. Jack's eyes were immediately drawn to the bright red letters carved into the walls. "Don't look. Don't seek. You'll regret it." He swallowed hard and stepped inside. The flashlight swept over an old wooden table in the center of the room. On the table lay a pile of photographs, yellowed documents, and an old videotape. Jack picked up the tape, inspecting it carefully. There was only one line scrawled messily on it: Jenny's truth. He held his breath and quickly turned on the small projector that was set on the table. The tape began to play. Images flickered in the dim light of the dark room. It started with the familiar sight of the house Jack now lived in. The footage wobbled, shifting, and then Jack saw Jenny. Jenny sat huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with terror. She screamed, pleading desperately.
Please, don't. I won't run away again. Please, leave me alone.
Her voice echoed, filled with despair. Then the image shook violently. A figure lunged toward her. Jenny struggled, but it was useless. The screams of pure terror echoed, then abruptly went silent. The screen turned black. Jack froze. A man wearing a mask, standing in front of the camera. He looked straight into the lens, speaking in a steady, chilling tone.
If you've found this, it's already too late. Jenny was just one of them. You'll be next if you don't stop.
Jack recoiled, his heart racing. Suddenly, the camera jerked, and the image blurred. The man turned away, and before the picture faded, Jack glimpsed the eyes behind the mask. That wasn't Peter. It was someone else. Jack hurriedly ran out of the room, but as he reached the doorway, a freezing chill shot down his spine. A shadowy figure blocked the exit, its red eyes glaring at him. The shadow had no clear form, but it radiated a dark energy that made Jack feel as though he were being strangled.
Don't seek.
The voice hissed like the wind through a narrow crack.
Don't, because you will never escape.
Jack screamed and charged forward. The shadow dissolved, but the tunnel suddenly shook violently. The path behind him collapsed, massive stones crashing down and blocking the way. Jack scrambled toward the entrance, but the darkness seemed to chase him, swallowing each of his steps. He ran until his body gave out, collapsing just before the exit. But as soon as he looked up, the iron door had shut tight. A deep voice rumbled.
You've seen too much. Nah, stay here with Jenny forever.
The door was locked from the outside. Jack screamed, pounding desperately on the door. But outside, there was only darkness and a sinister laughter echoing from somewhere far away. Jack had no idea that he had inadvertently stepped into a deadly trap, one where the mastermind was far more cruel and dangerous than Peter ever was, imprisoned in the dark basement. Jack wasn't just facing isolation, he was confronting the other sinister spirits he had unwittingly awakened. In the pitch-black darkness, Jack struggled to remain calm. The weak beam of his flashlight offered only the faintest glimmer of light. He looked around, but every corner was swallowed by darkness. Strange noises began to echo, like the whispers of hundreds of trapped souls. Jack swallowed hard, trying to listen. Where was that shadow? What did it want from him? A piercing screech erupted from deep within the basement. Jack spun around, eyes widening in terror as he saw a white figure dart past. It was Jenny, but this time, she wasn't just standing still. Her eyes were wide and crazed, her mouth twisted into a painful, twisted grin. She stretched her skeletal hand forward, as if trying to pull him closer.
Jack, don't be afraid. Stay here with me. Stay here. With all of them.
Her voice hissed, each word like a dagger piercing into Jack's mind. He stumbled back, his heart pounding wildly. All of them. He didn't have time to comprehend before more whispers erupted from all around him. The darkness began to shift. Ghostly forms started to emerge, pale and twisted, as if crawling out of the walls. Their eyes glowed red, distorted faces appearing from the shadows. They were laughing, crooked, mad laughter. Jack trembled, his flashlight sweeping across each face. It wasn't just Jenny. There were many others. Had they once lived in this house? Or were they victims buried deep within this dark basement? Then, Jack remembered the final part of the film. This house didn't just have one victim. All these spirits were victims of someone else. A faceless monster even Jenny hadn't dared to name. A fiend who had turned this house and basement into a graveyard for innocent souls. Jack was beginning to realize he had stumbled upon something no one else dared to face. A devil hiding in the heart of the city. A serial killer who remained hidden, his true nature still unknown. Jack edged backward toward the large steel door, desperately pounding on it.
Is anyone out there? Let me out.
But only the eerie giggling of the spirits answered him. White figures lunged forward, clinging to him. Jenny's cold, bony hand touched Jack's shoulder. He struggled, but a paralyzing numbness spread through his body.
Don't try to escape.
Annie whispered, her eyes now hollow, dark pits that seemed to stretch endlessly.
You're one of us now.
Jack screamed, slamming his fists against the wall. He didn't want to die here. He didn't want to become a lost soul in this house of death. But as he stared into Jenny's soulless eyes, he realized one thing. Even if he died, his spirit would be trapped here forever. There would be no escape. Just then, a different sound echoed. The steel door groaned and then swung open. Jack spun around, his heart clenching tight. A figure stood at the doorway, silhouetted by the light behind him, tall and imposing. Not a ghost, a human. It was him, the one who had killed Jenny and the other victims.
Fascinating.
His voice was deep, low, dripping with mockery.
You dared to come this far, but no matter, you will never leave.
Jack stared at the shadowy figure. He stepped into the room, slamming the door shut behind him. In the darkness, he smiled, eyes glimmering with a twisted delight.
Jenny's death was just a joke. You have no idea what you've unleashed, Jack.
He stepped closer, a glinting knife in his hand.
You think you helped her. No, you only made things worse.
Jack backed away, cold chills running down his spine. He felt the blood in his veins freeze.
Who are you? Why are you doing this?
Who am I? I'm the one who created this game.
He sneered, flicking the knife lightly.
And why? Because I want to. Because I enjoy it. And now I'll end this game.
Jack screamed and lunged toward the door, but the man was faster, blocking his path. The door slammed shut again, trapping him inside with the killer. Each breath echoed in the dark, each step growing closer. Jack felt his legs buckle beneath him. He had come too far, and now... The man suddenly swung the knife, but at that exact moment, the room trembled violently. Dark shadows erupted from the corners, filling the space with whispered curses and anguished cries. Hundreds of spirits surged forward, encircling the killer. Jenny appeared, her face twisted in wrath. She reached out, grabbing hold of the murderer.
You will never escape, murderer. You will pay.
He screamed, the knife clattering to the floor. The entire room shook as Jack stood frozen, watching the horror unfold. Shadows swirled, consuming the killer. His screams echoed, reverberating through the space until they abruptly fell silent. Then everything went still. Jack stood there, panting, sweat soaking his clothes. Jenny turned to look at him one last time, a sad smile tugging at her lips. She bowed her head, then slowly faded away into the darkness. The other spirits followed, dissipating into the air, leaving the room in utter silence. Jack was still alive, but he knew one thing for certain. He could never leave this place without being haunted by what had happened. Jenny's spirit might have been freed, but the darkness of this house would forever linger. The door creaked open. Jack stepped outside, looking up at the bleak, dark sky. Jack stepped out of the house, feeling the icy wind of the night breeze against his skin. The outside was eerily quiet, starkly different from the nightmare that had just unfolded within. He turned to look back, the house shrouded in darkness, silent like a predator waiting for its next prey. His gaze stopped at a window, where a faint figure flickered for a moment. Was it Jenny, or just an illusion? He didn't know, but one thing was certain. This nightmare would never truly end. Jack took a deep breath, stepped back, and then turned away, his silhouette blending into the dark night. But in his mind, the eerie whispers still echoed. Though he had escaped that house, Jack knew a part of him would forever remain trapped, lost in the maze of forgotten souls. And someone, somewhere, was still watching his every step, like a shadow that would never fade. Was this really the end, or just the beginning? Somewhere out there in the shadows, other spirits still lingered, and the secrets of this house had not been fully unraveled.